Okay, hello everyone, and welcome to our fourth session of the Migma Speaker Series. It's 4 of 5. If anyone attended earlier today, we had a session with Gerald Glode talking about landscape and place names. And the reason why we're having 2 sessions on one day is because Gerald really laid the foundations for the information about Mi'kma'ki and especially this area. And this evening's discussion is focusing on the history of the 2 communities that surround Acadia University. But before I get into that, I should introduce myself. My name is Sabrina Whitman, and I'm the coordinator of Indigenous Affairs at Acadia University. And this speaker series is being hosted in partnership between Acadia University and Glooscap First Nation, and it's being funded by Community Culture Heritage within the province of Nova Scotia. So we had really hoped, and for many of you who's been tuning into this whole series, I'm sorry, I'm kind of reiterating what you've heard a lot already, but the series was originally intended to be in October, but all of our speakers are very busy that month because it is Mi'kmaq History Month. It's launched on October 1st with Treaty Day. But not only are our speakers busy in that month, but at the same time, if what we're talking about is indigenizing the academy and ensuring that people value and appreciate Indigenous knowledge forms and culture more, we shouldn't only focus on these conversations 1 month of the year. It should be an ongoing conversation, and we should always be educating ourselves about these issues and topics. So we decided that January would be a prime time to have these conversations. At the same time, we have many students that are self-isolating last week and this week, and we wanted to ensure that they had something that they could participate in and learn about while they're in their isolation. So that's why we're having these events, and we have one more event at the end of the month that's focused on culture and racism in sport, and we have a Mohawk speaker, one Acorn Miller. But all of the speakers up to this point have been Mi'kmaq because we really want to educate individuals about Mi'kmaq culture and heritage and knowledge forms. And why this is important is because we are in Mi'kma'ki, and the only nation, First Nation, that existed within Nova Scotia has been the Mi'kmaq. So one thing, we always have these territorial acknowledgements and acknowledging that we are an unceded Mi'kmaq territory, and that's the reason why we make this acknowledgement, because the traditional and original peoples of this land were and are the Mi'kmaq. We're still here today, and when we say that it's unceded territory, why we say that is when we signed treaties with the British in the 1700s, chain of treaties, including the 1752 treaty, as you can see from my shirt, we never gave up any land. These treaties were called peace and friendship treaties for a reason. We did them because we were acknowledging that the British couldn't get rid of us. We were really strong warriors fighting the British, which was amazing because we didn't have the same type of fighting technology as the British, but they couldn't get rid of us. And we're acknowledging too that the British weren't going to be leaving as well. So how could we coexist with one another? We signed these treaties, and they're called peace and friendship because, as I said, that's exactly what they're about, living and coexisting in peace and friendship together. And so we fast forward to today, and that's why we also say that we're all treaty people, because treaties were signed by our ancestors historically in the 1700s, but they're still valid today, and we have to learn to coexist with one another, and we're doing that really well. I think Nova Scotia is a really great example of some successful partnerships that can exist between the Mi'kmaq and non-Indigenous allies. And the speakers that we have here today are really going to talk a little bit about that, but more so about the history of both of their communities. So this session came out of a desire to know who, not only understanding the broad level of about Mi'kmaq culture and knowledge systems, which you've heard already through the other 3 speakers that have 3 speaker series that have happened, but let's get more at that micro level as well. So Glooscap First Nation is situated on the east of Acadia University, about 10 minutes away near the town of Hansport. And then Annapolis Valley First Nation is to the west of Acadia, about 15 minutes away in Cambridge, so just a little bit past Kentville. So they're the 2 closest communities physically to Acadia University. And so our two speakers are going to talk about each of those communities, or as we're called reserves or bands under the Indian Act. So how today's session will work is each speaker is going to talk for about 20-30 minutes. While they're talking, please feel free to put questions or comments in the little Q&A box, and our moderators will be watching that. And then after the speaker's done, I'll go through those questions and pose them to that speaker. When they finish, then we'll move on to the next speaker, who will talk for 20-30 minutes, and then again we'll have Q&As. So the first individual who's speaking this evening, I'm very honored to be able to introduce her. Sarah is an executive board member of Nova Scotia Native Women. She serves as their treasurer, and she has acted in a number of roles for Annapolis Valley First Nation, especially speaking on the cultural and heritage side of things. So she is one of the community experts on this topic. And so I'm very pleased to hand the floor over to her, who will now give you some background information on her community.
Hi, how are you doing today? The first part I'm going to talk about is actually the land that the reserve is on. So basically, if you come off exit 14 and go down towards the Cambridge Reserve, you make a right-hand turn at the flashing lights, and up there on Ratchet Road on your left over the bridge, then you're heading to the reserve. Our reserve total land mass right now is 95 acres. Originally, though, in the beginning start of our reserve, there was a piece of land of 9.75 acres that was given to us around the 1897, and didn't really hold a whole lot of people. There was few there, but they were normally doing the same norm things, going to the water and for the summer, and then the inside for the winter feeds and stuff. Additionally, now the land, like I said, that was in the early 1800s there, late 1800s. There was additional lands that were added, 1924, 1989, 2002, and to a total of 95 acres. So that's, and then we also have a land that was given to us in regards to our church, St. Bernadette's Church. They're that on the graveside. We also have a new additions to the reserve. In December of 2018, the band had purchased a Webster's farm, the agricultural farm that was being Webster's farm for as long as we've been here, so sort of thing. And anyways, that, and then we also have an additional land across the 101. Another farm area was purchased, a little over 400 acres. So we've those two particular lands are not reserve land as at the moment. It takes time to do the policies and legislation to make sure that it's given full reserve status. So that's our base now for land. We also have, part of it is the St. Croix. At what time, okay, backtrack for a second. The Cambridge Reserve was known as the Annapolis Valley Band at first, and it included 3 reserve lands. One is the Cambridge, the second one was Horton, and the third one is St. Croix, outside of Windsor. So we have the 3 parcels of land. And in 1984, Rita Smith, a chief, had been the chief of that, and she wanted it to split. And I know the next speaker will help give you more information on Horton. But with just that the St. Croix is still part of both reserves, no matter if we split into 2 different bands. St. Croix is sort of like a gem between the two bands. There's no one living on St. Croix, but it's still part of our history. And like, for example, one is that the new Midas power at the time, back in the early 30s there, flooded out 32 acres of land on that, regarding to that St. Croix Reserve, as well as Eller House claimed 401 acres of land. So we have presently at the St. Croix is 326 acres. Like I said, no one lives on it, and we do still maintain it. Now that's including the land there. The next thing is that within our population, we have roughly 302 people who are registered under the Indian Act. That's including on and off, and roughly there's approximately a little under 100 registered on the reserve itself. And we do have some. We have community members that are non-native, husbands or wives, and that type of thing. For example, too, is our chief and council right now is our chief Gerald C. Tony. No, sorry, B. Tony. There's two, but just sort of like a history of a little bit of the chiefs since 1959. From 1959 to 1961, Michael Francis was the chief. 1961 to 1965 was Charles Phillips. 1965 to 1969 was John A. Smith. 1969 to 1970 was Marshall J. Smith. 1970-1971, Rita Smith, and she's the only. She was the first female chief. In 1971 to 1976, Gerald C. Tony was chief. 1976 to 1982, Rita Smith returned back in as chief. 1982 to 1992, David J. Tony. 1992 to 1997, Lawrence L. Tony. 1997 to 2011, Brian J. Tony. 2011 to 2015, Jeanette B. Peterson. And from 2015 to present date, it's Gerald B. Tony. And Gerald is the son of Gerald C. Tony. I did not, there's a whole, like, in terms of, misplaced my who the councillors for each of the chiefs were. Chiefs were actually before 1959. These are the ones that were elected. Prior to that, there are designated chiefs. It was more for paperwork. It wasn't really in terms of the full requirements as a chief. Just that the Indian INAC at that time needed to have somebody that was in charge for them and that sort of thing. So I got the land, and now I mentioned about the people, but in terms of the population and stuff, the basic family names that are connected with the Cambridge Reserve are the Tony, Capage, Phillips, Francis, Smith, Paul, and Morse. Those are the basic ones. Nowadays, of course, through marriages, there's all different names, but we all connect to them. I don't think if there's anything else. No, I think that's it. I know I'm a little fast talker, but yeah, there's a lot more to the reserve. Like right now, we have like the smoke shop. We have our school. We have Annapolis Valley School. We have the gas bar. We have the health center and the band office. And there's quite a few people involved with the community that are working with us as well. And it's just more like anywhere else. The best part was I can remember Joel saying was there was 3 houses built in 1974 were shells, and then and that's how the Indian Affairs provided the shell for the house inside. The families who occupied those homes had to fix and do whatever they needed to do for their homes. So there was not like nowadays, a lot of new homes are key, what's it called, key turn, that you open the door and you're all ready to go into your house. It was a little bit different back in the time. And the last house that I remember was Mark Tony had built. he had got the shell, and that was back in the early 80s. So you can imagine that's not very far from now. So we're still growing. There are 65 homes now on the reserve in the 95 acres. I don't know much more.
No, that's and I can questions to you as well. I think just some history about the Annapolis Valley I can speak to more too for individuals. Glooscap westward, you'll notice that our communities are for the most part a lot smaller. We have a lot larger off-reserve population, so people aren't living on reserve. And the reason why this is there's a few things. We also don't have very many Mi'kmaq speakers, especially living today. You'll find Mi'kmaq is more prominent from Shubi, Sibonacady, eastward up into Unama'ki, Cape Breton, and there's a few reasons for this. One, around Shubi, of course, the residential school was there, but where Annapolis Valley First Nation is, Bear River First Nation, Glooscap, which you'll hear was established a little bit later, and Acadia First Nation, which was really established late and was a majority of off-reserve individuals. The reason why the language isn't as strong in our communities is we were the first ones at contact, especially Bear River's right adjacent to Annapolis Royal, and that's where the French first arrived and later the British. So we were very much impacted by those relations, especially with the British. As well, the difference is between mainland Nova Scotia and Cape Breton is that at one point under the British, there were two different governors. And so the governors on mainland Nova Scotia very much used an assimilation technique. And in Cape Breton, it was more isolation. So with isolation, of course, the language could flourish more because we were left to our own devices in a way. And on mainland, for us, and our families, we were very much forced into the community. At the same time, too, if we get into the history around the deportation of the Acadians and when the British really took full reins from L'Acadie over to it being like New Scotland, Nova Scotia, what we had happen was, of course, a lot of Mi'kmaq fled from mainland Nova Scotia to Cape Breton, where the French were still occupying it there. And on mainland, there was a lot of things done that are nasty to our history, including diseased blankets and scalping. So that impacted our population as well. And so that impacted the language. Sarah was also speaking a bit about family names. And this is really interesting. Why we always talk about family names is there's a process in Nova Scotia. The Mi'kmaq have taken self-determination over identity. We have a process called Wulaginu, which means this is who we are, because the Indian Act doesn't define who is Mi'kmaq, just says who is an Indian under Section 6, which this can be a whole nother speaker series really getting into what the Indian Act is and also on identity. But for Mi'kmaq, we say only we know who the Mi'kmaq is, and we know who each other is. And a large part of that is being able to connect to one another's families. And we know which community you're from based off what your family name is. So when we talk like the Tonys that Sarah was talking about, when we hear Tony and you're saying, are you from Annapolis Valley? You know immediately. My family is the Peters family. We're Peters and Pictus and Brooks. That people automatically can say, oh, a Brooks, you must be from Shubi, or the Peterses are originally from Bear River, or now a lot of them are in Glooscap. That's how we connect and can verify who each other is. So when Sarah's saying all of these family names, it's really significant to us to be able to say, yeah, we know who those key families are who've established it. And importantly, I do want to really take a moment to note, Sarah was speaking a lot to the current chief of Annapolis Valley, Chief Jerry Jr. An individual who was going to speak with Sarah was Jerry Sr. And the day we were speaking about bringing him on, the next day he passed. He just passed recently. And he's been a very significant person, not only to Annapolis Valley's community, but to the Mi'kmaq as a whole, and leaves a really big gap in our communities and in terms of the knowledge. So I just want to make note of that because of how important he was to all of us. Obviously, I'm getting a little bit emotional there, so apologies for that. We do have some questions. One, and I'll actually answer this one. How are chiefs selected? So there's the Indian Act, which basically governs everything in terms of what happens on a reserve. And there is a process for the selection of chief. Depending on what type of band you are, you can have what's called a custom code. And so you with a custom code, what that means is you can determine how often your nominations are, or your period of being in position is. So Glooscap's under a custom code and it's a 5-year term. Other bands, when under the Indian Act, it's only 2 years. But the process is like any other democratic nomination process. You have a nomination period in which names are put forward, same as with the elected councillors, and then you have the period in which individuals campaign, and then you have the election time. So that's how that selection is chosen. Then we also have our elected, or not our elected, our historic governance structure, our traditional governance structure, which is the Grand Council, which we have captains, which means captains, and the G captain, the Grand Captain, and then the Grand Chief. And those are appointed positions for that, and they represent all of Mi'kma'ki, all of our districts, which Mi'kma'ki is all of Nova Scotia, parts of New Brunswick, up along the Gaspé Peninsula into Quebec, and then PEI, and we extend into now Maine and parts of Newfoundland. So that's the Grand Council represents all of that in our whole district. Some questions for you though now, Sarah, is could you tell us more about the school?
The school? Well, it's the school itself. We've never had a school. We always, the students went to the local schools. Over time, through Natasha Kennedy, our education director, as well as the counselor, she was always wanting to focus on to seeing if we can get a school started. We have what was called a learning center first. No, they'd be back, it'll be, I don't know, 3, 4, 5 years ago. So it's been there for a while. But in the last year, we got a status of being an Annapolis Valley First Nation school on the reserve. So we do have students that have found difficulties through going to the local schools. And I believe there's, I think if I remember correctly, I think there's like 15 students that are down in our, I still call it the learning school, learning center. But we have a sort of like a principal, and the teachers are there helping the students, not just on the curriculum that a normal school have, but it's also providing education for our youth to know what our history was and how we're moving forward, and into the culture and the craft work that we do. So that's basically what our school is about. So that's it for the school. Anything else on that? I don't. Okay.
And there's one question, and I can answer this one again. It's about Acadian and Mi'kmaq relations, as well as self-identifying Métis. So in terms of that question, so I actually, previous to coming to Acadia, worked for Gwilma Negotiation Office, and I led the work on determining on the process of Ula Nagino, and have worked closely with the Métis National Council, as well as all parts of Mi'kma'ki on this issue. So historically, and the Mi'kmaq and the Acadians have always been allies. That's why when we were fighting wars with the British, that's the reason why we were fighting against the British, is that we were allied with the Acadians and the French. In terms of the question specifically on self-identifying Métis of Nova Scotia, there are no Métis of Nova Scotia. The Métis is a distinctive nation, and they are Ontario westward. They have their own process of identification and determining who their membership is. Now, does that not, people say, well, what if you're mixed blood? I'm mixed blood. I'm Mi'kmaq, and my dad is non-native, but I don't say I'm Métis. There's a misunderstanding when hearing the word Métis. In French, métissage means mixed blood, but Métis with a capital M specifically means this Métis nation. So if you're saying you're Métis, then the Métis have their own process of recognition that you can go through to being a member of the Métis Nation. As I said, they're Ontario westward, and you can go through the Métis National Council to learn more about that. Are there individuals who may historically have ancestry that is Mi'kmaq? Yes. Now there's different levels for understanding what that actually means. So if you have someone who several hundred years ago procreated with a Mi'kmaq, that doesn't make you Mi'kmaq. And this is what the Mi'kmaq say through their process. And that's important to understand, is self-determination of nationhood is for the nation to determine themselves. This is a right. It's defined and affirmed in the United Nations Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous Peoples as well with this. So if several hundred years ago is your only connection, the Mi'kmaq say that's not enough. You have to have a connection today. Does it mean you have ancestry? Certainly, but that doesn't make you Mi'kmaq. That would be the same as me saying on my father's side, my last name's Whitman, so therefore does that make me British? Or on his mother's side, it's Franks. Does that make me German? No, that's their ancestry. The Whitman side came through the US and then arrived here as planters. Again, I don't say that I'm American either. That's just my ancestry. If there's a closer connection to today, what we say is, again, that doesn't mean you're Métis, that's a specific nation. But potentially, can you say that you're Mi'kmaq? We know that there's many Mi'kmaq who have been disconnected from their families due to residential school, the 60s scoop, and even more colonial processes previous to those. If you have a connection to the Mi'kmaq and are connected to our communities, we say, then go through Wula Naginu. That process has been in development since 2000, and it was implemented in 2019 in September. So it's almost 20 years of work to create this process. So go through that. So that's just to explain that a little bit more in terms of self-identifying Métis of Nova Scotia. There are not Métis of Nova Scotia, that's a specific nation, but the people are certainly of mixed family lineage, like all of us. But if you are claiming connection to having Mi'kmaq identity, then go through Wula Naginu and connect that way. And the Mi'kmaq say that means you're Mi'kmaq, not Métis. And for more information, we can certainly share some of that information. There is an MOU that was signed between the Mi'kmaq of Nova Scotia, our chiefs, and the Métis National Council on that topic. And then just recently, all of Mi'kmaqi, New Brunswick, in terms of this, New Brunswick, PEI, Nova Scotia, and Quebec, with the Métis National Council, also made a statement on this in December. So just looking again, one more question for you, and I think it's oh no, there's more questions. So are there hereditary chiefs? That would be for that question. Yes, that's the Grand Council that we were speaking to. Someone has given condolences as well, Sarah, and you can maybe send it to the family for the loss of Gerald Tony Sr. Can you relist the family names you mentioned? Someone is asking for.
Yeah, the family names are Tony, Capage, Phillips, Francis, Smith, Paul, and Morse. Morris.
Also, someone asked, is there a need for more housing in your band?
Oh, definitely. The community is growing, and we do need more houses. I don't know how to explain it. But we're limited to how many we can build. So it's not like we can get 10 houses built in 1 year. Sometimes it's one house, and another one is another 5 years. So it's a little long process of getting homes for everybody.
There's more questions on that one, and I might bug Lorraine to answer that too, because I know she dealt with the housing side. She was an elected councillor for Glooscap. Then there's one last question for you. I've only visited Nova Scotia as a tourist. I was perplexed to see the Mi'kmaq mentioned mainly as a footnote at tourist sites. Yes, very frustrating. And it was generally implied that the relationship between the Mi'kmaq and the British was generally friendly. Oh, do you think it is possible to present a more nuanced history of Mi'kmaq relations at these sites?
Well, I think we should, yes. I think that's most what we're talking about here in terms of letting people know more about us and to realize that there is a lot more to, even like the Keji park and stuff like that. Those are just sort of small things, but I've had people actually, someone who I've been working with on the Cornwallis River watershed was that he realized that he has 32 acres of land, so he's going to donate it back to our reserve, which has not, like, there was not even meters up in the mountain, but he feels that he's uncomfortable taking care of the land for instance, what do we do after? So he's donating the land back to us once, and he's got the arrangements for doing that. So there's a lot of things that we need to do to improve. I know there's works and different things we do. One is, for example, I just was meeting with Marlene Jodry, and she's working with the libraries on doing things and connecting, doing workshops and stuff, but opening it up for everybody to come and learn. So it's not like restricting it just for us to learn the games. No, it's to learn everybody where we stand at and how we move and what the future is entitled for everybody. So, and that sort of thing. Just one more side note though. A few weeks after Gerald passed away, we had another elder pass away. Papa Fred Phillips, who was one of our speakers in our community, and it's a big loss too for us. So yeah. both elders are really lost.
Yeah, I should have mentioned that too, Sarah, because like you said, he's one of the last speakers in the community. So it's a huge, huge loss to our nation of that knowledge that's there for individuals to understand too. Our elders too, the Mi'kmaq that they speak is different from the younger populations as well. And when we lose that knowledge, when we lose those speakers, we're really losing a big chunk of our history as well. Anyone who tuned into the Powwow speaking series with Jen, she spoke to the fact that you want to carry on traditions and culture exactly how the elders teach you, and there's a reason, because if you switch it a little bit, that knowledge gets lost along the way, and we don't want that. And that's especially found in our language. There's certain words that were said by elders even 20 years ago that we've lost, and it has so much of our history and culture ingrained into it. So when we lose that, we lose a huge part of our culture as well. I do want to say, like, to that question as well, we recognize the challenges that we have had in terms of acknowledging who the Mi'kmaq are in our history. And the province of Nova Scotia, I will really acknowledge them. They're working quite hard in treaty education. They have a directorate within the Department of the Office of Aboriginal Affairs, and it's directly aimed at educating individuals on this treaty history appropriately, so that they're focused on the public sector, public sphere, and then schooling, especially primary and secondary. They're really focused on ensuring that our primary and secondary students in the province have a strong education, but they're also trying to get proper education out to the whole province about us all being treaty people. Of course, it's a very small directorate with only a few staff working there, so they're working hard, but they've only been in existence for a few years. They just renewed their MOU last October. Another one who's really working hard on this issue is Parks Canada. They acknowledge that the stories haven't been told appropriately, and a lot of these locations are significant to the Mi'kmaq, Keji certainly, but even Louisbourg, the fortress of Louisbourg, but the Citadel as well are a few sites. Grand Pré, obviously. And so through the negotiation process in Nova Scotia, the Made in Nova Scotia process, that's one of the things that they're working on. And that's a prime example of that treaty relationship. How can we co-manage things together and ensure that the story being told represents all sides? So there's things that we mutually agree to, but then we might each have our own perspective on the stories as well. And we have to make sure that those sides are always told and shown. So anyways, that is the last question for you, Sarah. Thank you so much for your time. And if more come up after Lorraine presents, we'll throw it to you, but very much appreciate it for having you here today. Our next speaker, who happens to be, just as many of you probably see, this fluffy hair in the corner, is our next speaker. And one moment, I'll introduce you. So we happen to be in the same family bubble, hence why we're in the same camera lens. Lorraine Whitman is our next speaker, who will be speaking on Glooscap First Nation. She worked for almost 20 years as an elected councillor of that community, and for almost 20 years had worked in the community in education as well as health. And then she has recently, she was with the president of the Nova Scotia Native Women's Association, and we're quite honored to have her with us today. She was also an elder to Acadia University, but she's now the national president of the Native Women's Association of Canada. So she's normally quite busy, but I was able to get her to speak with us today because I don't know if people can see the similarities even on camera, but she also happens to be my mother, which I don't always normally say, but given with COVID in our bubbles, that's the reason why we're sitting here today together, because she is my mom. So I am going to hand the floor over to her and have her speak about the history of Glooscap as well. So I'm just going to shift the camera over a little bit and hand it over to Lorraine.
Okay, Walal and Sabrina, and Walal and Sarah, for all the information that you've given, you know, to all the people that are listening and are out there virtually. So, Jiliak, a Mi'kma'ki, on Cedar traditional territory of the Mi'kmaq Ilnu people. You know, I'm very honored and pleased to be on this evening and giving you more information about our quaint little community of Glooscap First Nation. And when I say it's a community and not a reserve, it's because, as Sarah had mentioned earlier, there was a division between Annapolis Valley First Nation, and it was Horton back in the 80s, but the name had changed, but I'll get a little bit more into that. So initially, as you well know, we've been here for thousands of years. We're still here, and we're trying to educate and inform people of our culture, our history, our First Nation communities, and there's 13 of them in Mi'kma'ki, and Mi'kma'ki is the name in Mi'kmaq for Nova Scotia. Unama'ki, you'll hear some of our people say, and that's in Cape Breton, the territory there. But getting back to our community, if you take the exit 8A off the 101 and you go around the roundabout, take the Sweetgrass exit, and you will be then entering on, you know, part of Glooscap. It's not recognized as the First Nation yet, but we are in the process. Matter of fact, we had votes that are going in today for it to be classified as
reserve land.
Reserve land. So it's 28 and a half acres, and you'll notice it from the 101. It's presently called Glooscap Landing, and it has the Tim Hortons, it has the convenience store inside, and the garage. So as you come down, you know, off Sweetgrass Road, then you'll come onto Ben Jackson Road. You continue down there, you know, it's probably about 5-6 miles down. You take a right, and you're going to be welcomed by the Glooscap First Nation. There's a convenience store there, there's a gaming facility, and there's also a garage area. So this community had opened under the you know, acknowledgement of the late Chief Rita Smith, as well as the late Chief Joseph Peters. Chief Rita was a chief at Annapolis Valley, and at that time there was the land which was Horton, but this land that was given there were 423 acres of land, and it wasn't reserve land at that time. It was a land that was acquired to us by a missionary. It was called the Migma Mission Society, and this was run by Cyrus Rand, and he was a linguist. He was also a missionary, and he worked with the Mi'kmaq people in the area. He learned their language, and he started writing the language, you know, so that we would be able to see it in written. So from there, once he had passed on, and the last person who was with the estate of this missionary society wanted this land, and it was Horton at the time, wanted the land to be given to the Mi'kmaq. And of course it was Micmac at that time. So it was then given to the Indian Affairs, and it was known as Horton number 35. So when Chief Rita was at Annapolis Valley, between her and Chief Peters, they needed a larger number of people to be able to break away from Annapolis Valley. So it's going back to what Sarah had mentioned with the land. It was in the 1971 they had started working on it. The land had then been separated, but in order to separate from Annapolis Valley First Nation into presently day Glooscap, there had to be a referendum between the people that lived on Annapolis Valley First Nation to say yay or nay that they wanted this parcel of land to go. There was also, as Sarah mentioned, the other parcel of land, which is known as St. Croix number 34. So with this petition, they had sent it into the government, and the people were sent out a ballot so that they could vote. The ballot was voted on, and it was the people 18 years and older. I believe there were 88 members at that time. There were 66 ballots that were returned. There were 38 that had said yes, it could be separated. There were 28 that said no. And there was a little controversy, and I can understand why. You're losing that parcel of land, and you're losing some of the families. So when Sarah had mentioned about the family names and how important it is, the family names that were going on Horton at that time were the Peters, the Smith, the Labrador, the Pictou, and the Francis. So any of those members of the family who were joining Glooscap First Nation, they were able to come in under that name. So in 1983, I believe, that's when Glooscap had become the name of Horton First Nation. Again, we are a very young community. We're not an old, community. I mean, in the 80s, it's not that far, that far away, that old of a community. So we are one of the younger communities. We up where we are, and why I say it's a quaint community, because it is outside of the town district, and you have to go up, the mountain area because it's on a lot of rock area. There's approximately 40 houses that are on the community. Sabrina had mentioned I had been an electric counselor at one time. So my father was a chief previous, to Chief Clark when I was a counselor, and he was initiating building of the homes coming on the reserve. He had been elected after Chief Rita, and I remember, my brothers going up and, cutting the roadway. But this roadway, I also have to acknowledge Noel Smith, which is Chief Rita Smith's husband, because he was also a veteran in the World War II, and he was given a parcel of land. And he wanted to be acknowledged for the parcel of land that goes on the entrance of this 423 acres. So at that time, Noel had sold a parcel of his land so that we would have the right of way to these 423 acres. And then he had divided his lots up, what was given to him from Veterans Affairs to his family members. So, you know, it goes into a lot of dates and a lot of work that's been put in for this separation. But on Glooscap, we have approximately 400 Migma reserved members that are registered under the Indian Act. So, and majority of our members are off reserve. They live in different parts of Canada, the US, and you know, there's many that are down the States. Initially, we were a custom band. We were one of the first custom bands. And a custom band is when there were any elections that had taken place, all of the members who lived off the First Nation community were able to vote. And now I believe almost all of the communities are custom band where all of their members are able to. Now I can't, yeah, within Nova Scotia area. So our members are able to vote for their chief and council. On our community, we have, you know, the chief that's elected by community members. We have 3 councillors. Presently is Chief Sid Peters. We have Councillor Larry Peters, Councillor Jeannie Labrador, and Councillor Linwood Peters. Again, we go back where we have our Grand Council members. We do have a Grand Council member on our community, and that his name is Captain Larry Peters. On Sarah's First Nation community in Annapolis Valley, she had mentioned Gerald Tony Sr. was a captain, and my condolence, Sarah, for the passing of Gerald Tony, as well as Freddie. You know, they were beautiful people, very instrumental with their knowledge, with their speaking, their storytelling, especially at the events that we had. Gerald was an avid basket maker, and you know, Freddie was one of the language teachers in the school, the primary class, and what have you on the Annapolis First Nation. So I do have to express my condolence there, Sarah. So just moving, you know, a little bit further from the Grand Council, we do have those. Sarah herself, you know, is the president, I believe, of your First Nation community, Sarah. So Sarah is the president of her Native group on Annapolis Valley First Nation. Women. For the Native Women Association. So I'd like to also, you know, express, you know, Sarah's work, because the work that the Native women do in all of the communities, it's all volunteer. You know, they're not paid positions. So Sarah, thank you for all the work that you do. Again, I'm getting sidetracked, but I'm going to get back to my community. On our community, we were the first community in Nova Scotia that had an agreement with the town of Hansport. As you know, in many of the communities, our water is not very good drinking water. And as you can appreciate, when you're up in the mountain area, you have to drill hundreds of feet down in order to get water. Well, we did that when when I was a counselor on Glooscap, but our water would run out. So we couldn't build houses any more than what we could. And again, when Sarah mentioned housing, yes, we all need more housing. We're overcrowded, and our housing, we only get 1 house a year. And there are so many people that need housing that we need more housing. So with that, with the water, the housing problems, we did join up with Horton, the town of Horton, and we had an agreement. Yeah, in Hansport, the town of Hansport, in which we had an agreement for the water to be brought up from the town up into our community. On our community, we have a chapel. We have a health center. In 1985, we had gone for funding. Our health is so important. And we had applied for proposals, and we were able to get a health center on our community. So in our health center, we have our health director, Charlotte Warrington. We have a NADICA worker. This is a Native Alcohol and Drug worker. We have a doctor that comes to our community every week. We have a nurse practitioner and a diabetes specialist that comes once a month. Diabetes is very prominent in the Indigenous communities. So these, health team that come are so important to the health of our community. We also have a podiatrist that comes in, once a month. We have blood work, a nurse that comes in twice a month to do our blood work. So that's the health component, our health center. We also have a chapel that's built onto the health center. Catholicism is very large and strong in some of the communities, and we do have that chapel. Now, the chapel isn't only if you're a Christian, but we also do some of our cultural components there. We have our smudging. We have different ceremonies and gatherings in there as well. We want to blend both the Christianity and also the spirituality of the First Nation and the Migma to it. At the very top, we have a boardroom. We have the band hall. We also have a large community gathering, which is connected to the band hall. In the band hall, that's where we have our governance structure, and that's where our chief and council are. They have a boardroom where their meetings occur. If there's community meetings or gatherings, because we do have an AGA, this is an annual general meeting of all of our members, and we let them know what's happening in our community, what we're doing, what works are happening. And we want their input. And when I say input, I mean the chief and council is asking the delegation, what would you like to see on our community? So, they listen to us. Our voices are heard. Our chief and council, they listen to us. Our youth and our families and our mothers, they wanted a new play area. There's a new playground that's there, and it's more cultural, to a First Nations community. So we do have that for the children. There's a swimming pool that we have for recreation in the summer. There's swimming lessons, adult lessons that take place, as well as for the diabetes initiative, we would have exercise with some of the families who have diabetes, because we want to be able to get out there and do some movement, and swimming is so easy in the bit of, on your body. So we do have that. We still have a small little playground near there. And let me see, I'm just trying to go through and see what else we have, to offer. But, it's open, and yeah, and again, it is quaint, because in the summer, when you're at the very top and you're starting to come down the hill, you're going to see the mist that is in the distance, and it looks absolutely phenomenally beautiful. And I'm so proud to be part of Glooscap. My father is part of Bear River, and I still feel that's part, or any First Nation community that I go on, I've always felt welcome. And I just want to let each and every one of you know that once we get over this COVID pandemic, we do have activities, in our community, and we have a joint relationship, with Annapolis Valley, with Bear River, and, follow the Powwow Trail. On the map, if you're interested in knowing more about the culture of Mi'kmaq, follow the Powwow Trail. Go to the powwows. You're going to be able to purchase some of the works made by the women and the men that they sell there, and they're authentic. They're Migma made. And you'll hear the language being spoken. And as as Sabrina had mentioned and as Sarah had mentioned, the Mi'kmaq that's been spoken years ago is different than what's today. And of course, some of the words that we have today, we didn't have the technology. So there's new words that are coming in with the Mi'kmaq Nation. And our language is verb-based. We speak a lot, but it's all verb-based. And where we are in Glooscap, you know, just across the way is Glooscap, and that's where Glooscap, our hero, has come from, where the legends have originated. So it's so important to all of us. And I'm a proud Mi'kmaq woman. And, you know, we're here for each and every one of you that are out there, and we're here to help educate. And I do appreciate and thank Acadia for having this session on. It's very important, not only to, you know, to people who don't know of the Mi'kmaq Nation, but also the questions, because we as Mi'kmaq, we eat it, we live it, we drink it, because that's who we are, the identity of who we are as Mi'kmaq people, and our language is the important part to it. So, you know, welcome. And we are all treaty people. So I guess I'm ready for questions. Well,
so thank you, Lorraine. And since everyone does know she's my mom, I will say thank you, Mom. I'm sure, so if anyone's tuned into any of these other sessions, you wouldn't have heard me chiming into the presentations of other speakers, but you are getting to see the beauty of what is this mother-daughter dynamic. So you might have heard me squeaking little words on the background of what Lorraine was looking for, trying to say. So enjoy the show that exists between the two of us, and I hope it's entertaining. But one point that, before we get into some of the questions that Lorraine spoke to about the Powwow Trail, for individuals who might not have tuned in, last week we did have a session on Powwow protocol and Regalia. All of these sessions have been recorded, and in a week, hopefully by next week, I'll have them all posted to the Indigenous Affairs webpage on Acadia's website. So you can look for that recording to learn a little bit more about protocol. So Lorraine, I guess one of the questions, building on the housing question, is someone asked earlier, how does funding work for houses, and why isn't there more funding from the government?
Oh, that's my question to the government. Why isn't there more funding? But you know, the funding, the membership, they go on the 13 First Nation, and as what happened, I've been out of the governance structure on Glooscap since 2012, so it's been going on 9 years. But there's so many houses that's given to each community. Sometimes the smaller communities, as Sarah had mentioned, we may not even get a house, because they go by population per capita, and because we are small First Nation communities, they don't feel that the housing is just as needed as on the, you know, the larger First Nation communities. But it's a necessity, because we have many of our community members that live all over and would love to be able to come home, to be with their family, to be able to, you know, to be involved more with the cultural component, the heritage that we have, because it's so rich in what we have. But due to the housing, we're unable to move home and to be able to be with our family. So we usually get only one housing, you know, at the time I was there, one housing, you know, maybe every other year if we were lucky. So we, you know, it's up to the government that they give us the housing. If we had extra dollars that we could, yeah, we could build our own housing as well, but we don't. You know, we have to look at the education component of, you know, of our community. We have to look at the health and make sure that those are all also taken care of. So yes, we have to go for funding, and we only get one house a year if we're lucky.
Another question for you, and typically the people I'm posing the questions don't get to see what all the questions are, but I will read it to you anyways. I often hear that Migma who do not speak the language feel left out. How can Mi'kmaq non-speaking can feel more included in being Mi'kmaq and spirituality?
You know, how do you feel more Mi'kmaq? is what you do. It's in your heart. It's in your spirit. If you feel you're Migma and you are Migma, you know what? Express it. You know, go to some of the events. When I mentioned going to the powwows, go introduce yourself. Go see what the people are doing. You know, I drum and I do. You know, some of the, it's called Intertribal Dance. When you're at a powwow at the beginning, there's Intertribal Dance. That means that you, if you're not, you know, with one tribe or another, or you're not even a First Nation person, you're able to go into that intertribal. Watch how the people dance. Why I go into the intertribal, because I'm so out of shape, I can't do some of these other spiritual dances and what have you, shaw dances. Those are a lot of work. You know, I see some of the jingle dancers and they are beautiful performers, but you need to be in shape. When you go in competition with some of these dancing, you need to know that you may be dancing for a half hour. Depending what powwow you go, you may be dancing for 2 solid hours, and you're dancing in hot heat. So if you want to feel part of the community, you know, look up the First Nation. You know, you're at Acadia, you do have you know, some of the Indigenous that are there. Look at Annapolis Valley on their website. Look on Glooscap website, see what's happening. And I do know that Darlene Copeland works with some of the students. You could always get in touch with her. On each community, there's also an education counselor. You know, give them a call and just ask them, do you know what's happening, you know, in the First Nation communities that I could be involved with? If you're a female, if you're, you know, a young girl, a woman, or anyone from the 2S LGBTQIA community, get yourself involved with the Native Women Association. Get involved. Sarah's there in each of the First Nation communities. There is a president of that Native organization, and they would love for you to be able to
Native
join.
Women's Organization.
Yes, Native Women Organization.
And they have representation off reserve as well, so it's not limited to just the 13 Mi'kmaq communities as well. As Lorraine also said, to dancing, the stamina required for that. I just want to add that piece. I have one friend who's recognized nationally for his dancing. He's a grass dancer. And he's in very good shape, works out all the time, also an athlete, plays hockey and baseball. But he says for preparing for powwow season, no type of conditioning can prepare you for powwow dancing except dancing itself. Because what's required for that is completely different, and it is a lot of work. The next question, I think, is very well suited given how long you've been in politics. Don't give me that look. Can you speak a bit to what your experience of being a woman in politics was like, or is like? I will add that.
You know, it's a challenge. But you know what? As we learn, you know, we go by our 7 sacred teachings. And with these teachings, it's love, respect, courage, honesty, truth, humility, and wisdom. And when we go through all of these steps and phases as we go, life is a challenge, but you know, a challenge is good. And you know, the women, we are from the matrilineal avenue. The women were the ones that were at the very forefront. They are so highly respected, as is the elders in the communities. The women always would have the, you know, the meeting with the community members. They're the ones that go far back, because the women are the water keepers. The women are the only ones that can bring another living spirit into this world. So we're very, very strong. So I always keep in my mind, I know my mother had 14 children. And, you know, being a Mi'kmaq, there's racism, there's discrimination out there. And, you know, sometimes it's really hard to let that go. But I don't feed that negativity. I just feel that, you know what, some people are truly ignorant. Some people are arrogant. And when I use the word ignorant, they truly don't know much about you as being a Mi'kmaq person or an Indigenous person, but it's the arrogance that bother me, and that's the people that know, that choose to refuse to acknowledge it or do something about it. So that's one of the hardest areas that I find is the arrogance, and I find it everywhere. It's in every institution that you see, whether it be on the playground, whether it be in the school, in the medical field, the RCMP, wherever you go, you'll find it, but don't feed into it. And you know what? Empower yourself. No, you know what? I'm worth it. I can be this. And don't accept yourself. You know, if you're going into a nurse, why don't you go in for being a doctor? But I mean, if you want to go in for a nurse, that's fine. But don't put your standards any lower. Put your standards up here, because you can reach them. If that's what you really want, do it. Because you know what? We're all dreamers, and we need dreamers, because we want dreams to come true. And that's the only way they're going to come true, if we put our dream out there and we work for it. So I guess getting back to your answer, it's difficult, it's very challenging, but you know what? I love a challenge in life, but use it in a respectful way. And I always say, you know, I'm your partner, we'll partner with you. You know, the relationship, whether it be government or whomever, what organization. No, I don't want a partner. I want an ally. I want someone who is going to be there, and we are going to reach the goal, whether we're going down in the river in a canoe, you and your canoe, me and my canoe. All of a sudden there's a large rock in the middle of the river, and you have to go this way, I go this way. Doesn't matter how we get there, we're going to reach the end, but we're going to have challenges. We're going to have a lot of trips down that river, but we're going to get there together, because it's a common goal. And that's what an ally is, because in partnerships, they're not always equal. In some partnerships, they feel that they're up here and you're down here. When we work as allies, we work together in balance, and we will get the same goal. I hope that answers your question.
I think very much your philosophy. I will say, like Michelle Obama's, when they go low, we go high, and Lorraine very much reflects that philosophy. I've grown up since age 4 with my mom being in elected politics, and I will say I'm her only child, and I'm very fortunate to be able to say that, because to have this woman as my mom and role model, she is always positive. No matter the challenges that come before her, she always ensures that her approach is positive. She never allows the negative. I know when I come to her and complaining about things, she says, Sabrina, tell me the positive out of that negative. She never allows you to be a Debbie Downer, even when you want to. She's always this little ray of sunshine, and I feel extremely blessed to have her as my personal role model. But I think the Mi'kmaq Nation, I'm biased, given that she is my mother, to be able to say that, but I think she's an extraordinary example of a woman in politics, and who's a strong woman, because she just has this approach to life. In terms of, there's a few questions, and it goes back to housing, but they were, I think we kind of answered that question earlier. I think the rule about where one house can be built, again, it's not specifically a rule, it's more about per capita and how much government funding is given to each community. And it's based off of the number of people who are registered to that ban list. And again, we said, I know there's a lot of terms that we're using today that for folks who are not Indigenous, it might seem really confusing, and maybe a future session we just need to have on the Indian Act and understanding all of these terms that are very normal for us to know. This question, and I probably could answer better than you. I'm just, you can answer it. It's about governance and election systems. That's what anyways, there's a lot of talking about changing to a proportional representation system for elections in federal and provincial elected politics, and some municipalities have tried it. Have there been any talks in Glooscap or Annapolis of changing democratic elections to a PR system? And I know there hasn't been, and part of our conversations, well, I said I could probably talk to it, is because the Migma across Nova Scotia, again through the negotiation process, the Made in Nova Scotia process are looking to develop our own governance structures again, and a PR system is a Western created system. And what we're actually trying to do is to take governance and reintroduce our own traditional governance systems to our nation as a whole. So no, a PR system isn't something that we're trying to look towards. However, again, and that's in our overall negotiations and self-governance processes. That's separate from the Indian Act. Within our bands, we're still under the Indian Act, and so we have no ability to change our electoral system when we're under the Indian Act. That is a document that was created in the 1800s, and it governs everything within our communities, and we don't have the ability to change that. Only the federal government has the ability to change that. Could you talk about land and home ownership in a Mi'kmaq community?
Okay, the land on a First Nation community, or people will call it a reserve. The land is federally owned. It's not owned by individuals, but there's always a but there are some members that have a BCR, and this is.
Sorry, I was going to say, which is called a band council resolution.
And I was going to say that after I said BCR.
I didn't think you were going to. I thought you were going on a rant.
No, BCR. So with that band resolution, council resolution, they can give a parcel of land, a building lot, to an individual. But I know I can only speak on our First Nation community of Glooscap. If a person is to be given a parcel of land, it has to go before the delegation at an annual General Assembly. I have got to have a paper stating, to chief and council, I'm interested in building my home. May I get a parcel of land so that I can build my home? I will go and get the money to build it. I will not have the band have to deal with that. You don't have to pay. It's just, I want a land to be able to live near my family. It's voted on in a democratic way at the band meeting by the delegations that's there. And, from the vote, whether the majority say, yes, let's give her this parcel of land, or no, they're the ones that are the deciding factor. It's not the chief and council that can give land out. It has to go to the delegation to vote on.
And again, you don't, even though you're given a parcel of land, which is called a CP lot, you don't actually own that land. You only own the house on that land, because that land itself is owned by the government. Now, those are CP lots, certificate of possession lots. Then other individuals who don't have a CP lot, they have a home to live in that the band has given them, but they don't even own that home. That's owned by the band, by the reserve.
It's more of a rental unit, so they don't own that parcel of land.
So when we speak to housing and housing being built, those are homes that the band builds for community band members, we should say, not community members. So they're members of the band list, but they don't own that home. They might live in that home their entire life, but legally the home is actually owned by the band. A question is, do we write provincial or federal government? Read the lack of housing funding. Yes, pressure them on that. Lack of clean water, lack of providing us enough funds for education, lack of healthcare support. Can we continue the list? Missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls.
It's been classified the findings of a genocide. It's the government's responsibility to be able to be there to assist. So yeah, you need to put pressure on the government to help the Indigenous. And it's really ironic because sometimes when we're out there protesting the water, fracking and all this, people are saying, oh my God, the Indians are at it again. No, the Indians aren't at it again. Is what they're doing. They're speaking up. They're advocating and defending the land for you, for your generations after you, your grandchildren, your great-great-grandchildren. We need to start taking responsibility because, we aren't owners. No matter if I live off reserve, in Lawrencetown. I have my own home, we have land, but you know what? I don't own that, because if I didn't pay taxes on my home, the bank would have it, the government. So no one really owns their home. And it was told to me by an elder that, Lorraine, if this rabbit stands here in this plot of land and he hops to that land, this is no longer his land. It's his land, the other one. So we're only caretakers. We're stewardships of the land. And you know what? We're not doing a very good job of it, people. We're doing a terrible job. You know, and yeah, we have global warming that's happening, but we have to adjust with it, and we can do that, but we have to be respectful for one another. And, you know, we need to take care of the waters, because the water is a living entity. We need that water. We need it for drinking. We need it for our body, because if you look, you know, when we speak of Insit Nogama, you know, all my relations, yeah, all of our relations. But when we talk about that, I'm not talking about my mother, my father, brothers, sisters, aunties, uncles, cousins. I'm talking about the land. I'm talking about the water. You look at your makeup. How much percentage of you is made of water? How much in your body, you have iron in your body, you have calcium, you have magnesium. All of your body structure is part of the earth, part of the land. So when we say Insit Nogamal, my relations, I'm talking about us as being part of that land. And that's where we're at. So that's why we need to continue to keep it clean and stop polluting.
Next question is, do most Mi'kmaq follow a Catholic religion? Does Catholic religion support spirituality?
Yes, many of us, we were brought up as Catholics. Myself, I'll speak on myself. Yes, I was brought up as Catholic, and my faith is very important. When I say Catholic, you know, there's a big difference between faith, spirituality, and religion. Religion is a name, whether I'm Catholic, Protestant, whatever, but it's the faith, it's the spirituality and the understanding. To me, I know there's a superior being more than who I am, whether he be known as God, Niskam, Creator, Allah, whomever it may be. But yes, Catholicism is very intertwined. And I know there's been a lot of problems with the churches and what have you, but at the same time, we have to acknowledge that it's the people that did it, not the faith, not, you know, not the whole meaning of who we are and the essence of who we are. So yes, Catholicism is very strong, and it plays a very large role with our Grand Council, because we do have St. Anne's Day, and that's, you know, a day that we have in Unamagi. It's a 3-day during Pentecostal, so it's very important to us. And in some of the communities, I do know that in Millbrook, the priests there, as well in Suspatagity, the priests there, they will speak Mi'kmaq, and they do implement some of our native culture in with the church. So you know what, we can blend them.
And I think, like, and also even our Treaty Day started, like how we launched Treaty Day is with a church service in Halifax that we all attend. So probably some of the strongest practicing Catholics in the province of Nova Scotia are the Mi'kmaq. Anyone who tuned into Gerald's presentation earlier today with the Father, the Son, the Holy Ghost, he also speaks to our legends and how, like, Glooscap and the Creator, and I'm not good with my legends who the third one was. It's very similar stories, so you can find similarities between different practices, if we can say. In terms, the next question is, are there any fluent speakers in the communities? I think first it's if you're referencing to these two communities, or do you mean all of Mi'kma'ki or all of Nova Scotia? Because Mi'kma'ki is beyond Nova Scotia. Certainly fluent speakers in Eskasoni and in a lot of the communities in Cape Breton. Eskasoni is really well known for the having speakers, and has been a really good model for having the language. I think the Mi'kmaq have something to be proud of. We're the first one at contact, but our language is quite strong in comparison to even other nations, Indigenous nations across Canada. There's speakers in Bucknagag and Millbrook and Sibonacady. There's speakers in Acadia First Nation. Sarah, do you have any you have one speaker left, right, in the community?
Yes.
One speaker.
Yeah.
Which is Freddie's sister, right?
Yes.
Yes. And she actually is the elder. She's the oldest one on the community. Like, you know how you, for even to the off, she's like the top next, how to run the down. She's a top elder.
Yeah.
And then in Glooscap, do we have any? We have some speakers, but
we have
fluent
speakers, but no fluent speakers.
And I would like, when I look at you, you understand it.
Yeah.
But can speak some, but understand it more, which people will see, like, again, colonialism. I've had people, and it's very offensive. Someone says, well, why can't you speak your language? Well, thanks for pointing that out. Again, colonialism has impacted us severely, and my grandmother chose not to speak Mi'kmaq to her children to protect them from sending them with the 60 scoop in residential schools, but also the stigma attached to speaking your language. So she did it to protect her children and her grandchildren. There's only certain words I know, and some of those words I know them only in Mi'kmaq, like madawas, which is porcupine. I didn't know the English word for that, but yet I'm a fluent English speaker. But people have to understand that it's very offensive when you come and say, well, why don't you speak your language? Understand our history. You don't know the pain that we feel when we can't speak our language and can't understand what's going on around us. It is hard for us. Another question, would you mind going over how you navigated working through the colonial aspect of election and politics? I think especially, like, I mean, there's the colonial aspect. I'm looking at that and expanding, knowing Lorraine's history. That there's the one aspect of working within Indigenous politics, so banned elections, and then with Native women in your elections there nationally and provincially. But then I would say then there's the really getting into the colonial aspect of mainstream politics, because I feel like there's a greater stigma in colonial aspect to those over.
Yeah, and when Sabrina speaks about, you know, the colonialism and politics and voting and this and that, you know, it wasn't until 1960 that First Nation people were able to vote. You know, many of our men and women, they fought in the wars because they went there to protect their families in this country so the war wouldn't come to their people. But yet they were not acknowledged as being important. And it wasn't that long ago when, you know, a commemoration pin had been given for the First Nations, the Métis and the Inuit that had gone and fought for Canada. We weren't even Canadians. And when many of our people went to war and whatever, their membership was taken away. They weren't even classified as an Indigenous person. So how hurtful is that? In that component, now I'm seeing more of our Indigenous people going into the politics, but you know, it's still a man's game. It's still a male-dominated area. And I speak to that because I was there and it was male dominant, and it's hard because it's almost like an old boys club, and it's hard to break those walls. But we can do it, ladies. We can do it. You just have to set your mind and not give up. And I know that, you know, we've always been told as, you know, a young girl, never give up, never give up. You can take a break, but don't give up. And sometimes we need that break. And when we do mistakes in our lives, you know, they're not mistakes if we learn from them. It's a teaching tool. Sometimes it's a darn hard tool. You know, we may get knocked about and whatever, but get back up and get at it. You know, take that little break, but don't give in to it because you are so important. You know, we're all beautiful people. We all have gifts to give. Sometimes we don't know what our gifts are, but we find along the way. So yeah, you know, keep the good spirit up and follow your dream and aspirations in life, because that's important. That's what drives you to be who you are and why you're even listening to us today is because you want to know a little bit more about the communities that Sarah's to, the community that I belong to, and also what Gerald has spoken, you know, and
Trevor,
all the other
Clifford.
speakers, Jeff Ward, who else?
No, not Jeff Ward, Trevor and Clifford.
Trevor and Clifford. You know, these are beautiful people.
Although he's another person we need to have at some point is Jeff Ward.
But, you know, they're all excellent speakers, and they have a lot of knowledge that comes with them. And, you know, these people have no problem answering questions that you may have. And if we don't have the answer, we will certainly get back to you.
We have another question. It says, I'll answer too, but what about commercial property? Could I expand my business and open a second facility on Glooscap land someday? I think the first question, I have a question for you. It's Ron, I see, is we don't know what your business is, so we can't say if you can open a second facility. But for commercial properties, I know you'll expand on it more, but you can, if you look at Millbrook as a really good example, the businesses can establish partnerships with the bands, or the bands may have buildings that they rent out and commercial spaces can be rented from the band. I know Glooscap's aim is in part 2 of Glooscap Landing to have kind of like not a strip mall, that's not appropriate, but have a space, office spaces that businesses can lease from the band. Can you expand on that? Yeah.
So with Glooscap is what you'd have to do. You have to go to the band council. There's proper protocol in each area because you must realize the dynamics and the governance of each community is different. So if you're planning on wanting to have a business there, you would have to speak to chief and council. They would look at it because they have a forecast for 5 years, 10 years, 20 years down the road, what their initiatives are. And if you are able to fit into those initiatives that they're driving towards, they would be the best ones to answer, you know, those questions and see if your business is able to meet, you know, what they're proposing that empowers and also makes the community more accessible to whatever you have.
And our last question for this evening, Max is asking, and I'm going to answer this one too, and then you can chime in if you want. But some of the most dynamic Indigenous resistance seen recently in Canada calls for land back. Do those in your nation support dismantling the Canadian state and its laws and reclaiming Indigenous sovereignty? And my response to that is Indigenous peoples, Indigenous nations, when I say peoples, us as individuals and our nations are diverse and different. Just like any other society, each individual has their own opinion on governance, on politics in general, on any parts of the public sphere and private sphere. So we can't really answer that question in terms of a pan-Indigenous approach or even speak on behalf of our whole nation, because that's not appropriate. That's not the Migma way to speak on everyone or speak on different individuals' opinions. So certainly there's a diversity of views across Mi'kmaq and across the Mi'kmaq Nation in Nova Scotia on that, and each individual has their own opinion on how that issue should be approached, is what I would say.
And, you know, I concur with what Sabrina has said. We're not here to be able to govern other communities. That's not the way that we are. We have our own governance that we do, and, you know, we can put input into it. But on that, you know, each and every one has their own, and the dynamics and the diversity. If you look across Canada and into the territories, we are so diverse in so many ways. You know, some of the mining up north, you know, it's helped a lot of the Indigenous people up there. But if we had mining here, it could wipe all of Nova Scotia out. I know the timings.
No, so thank you, Lorraine, on that. But as we're saying, yes, each individual has their own opinion, and so we can't speak. That have to be what is our own personal opinion on that, as opposed to the whole nation. And so, yeah, so it's dependent on each individual within the nation and different nations themselves. So I think that is all of our questions that we have this evening. Thank you everyone for participating in this discussion. We really appreciate it. I have to give huge thanks before we end to all of the people who made this possible at the back end. So we have Natalie and John and Valerie who are doing all of the production side and the moderating side of things. And this event wouldn't be able to be possible without them. We also had Karen and Sherry who have provided outstanding support on communications and IT to make today possible and all of the other sessions possible. So I'm hugely, hugely, hugely appreciative to those individuals because it would have been a mess if it was just myself. And so just to end, again, I have to thank Sarah so much for speaking and telling us all about Annapolis Valley. And thank you very much, Lorraine, Mom, for coming and speaking on Glooscap. And thank you to everyone for watching us in our special dynamic going back and forth. But I'm very appreciative to have you here and to have Sarah here as well. Both of them are strong Mi'kmaq women who are advocating for our rights on a daily basis, and just so fortunate that we can have them both here to speak. So on that, thank you everyone. Have a very safe evening, and on the 24th, please tune in if you're able to in the evening to hear one Acorn Miller speak on culture and racism in sport. Again, as I said, she's Mohawk. She was an Olympian and co-captain of the water polo team. She was shot as a teenager at Oka. She has a very interesting story, very motivational. She's one of my mentors who I look to a lot for her knowledge, and she's exceptional. And we're hoping outside of the speaker series to later have a session on research and ethics with Indigenous peoples and communities, and that will be led by the Dean of Graduate Studies and Research. So that will be another exciting session to hear and participate in. So when we have that, we'll send that out as well. So good night, everyone, and have a safe evening.
Bye-bye. Thank you.